friends. Pray with me, would you? Wonderful God, thank you for the breadth and depth of your love for us, for the ways you lead us outside of our comfort zones into greater harmony, greater discipleship, a deeper faith, strong enough for the challenges of the day. Amen. We're just finishing up Exodus here at Cedar Hills. We've been in Exodus for a couple months now. We're pushing into the escape and now into the promised land today. So no conquest, no violent battles, no Hebrew children slaughtering folks, killing folks, getting in, and now you're Jews like us or you're dead. Never happened. No archaeologist, no biblical historian thinks it happened. It's a really unfortunate reading of some really powerful mythology about how God is with us and for us, and God is powerful, that as we've seen, turns into horrific theology and horrible politics and just tragedy for Jews and Christians alike. Instead, the story we've been telling is of folks oppressed who managed to break free from Pharaoh, who managed to celebrate a new life, a new way of being, for us too. And that's what then was compelling to some folks who joined us, couldn't believe that a band of outlaws had got away from Pharaoh, and now we're worth celebrating and worth coming to a new place, a new religion, eventually a king, eventually some of the same old problems, but for our purposes today, an attractional model of who else might need freedom in their lives, might need God to take their side, that they might be more truly human, more truly humane. All this freedom, when what we're looking for is meaning, today I want to talk about constriction. I want to talk about a law. So this is all a long time ago, 3,000 years ago, a little more. It's the shift from the Bronze Age, believe it or not, to the Iron Age, about 1,000 or 1,200 BCE, before the Common Era. It's so interesting because just a couple weeks back, we were talking about melting down gold, very soft metal, easier to melt, to make a golden calf. And that whole thing didn't go very well. About this time, the smelting improved to the Iron Age, when they figured out how to find the right kind of stones and to get the fire hot enough that metal could be extracted. The reason that matters to you is because the folks who discovered this, the Egyptians, were able to then make of that metal a couple of key elements, namely axles for chariots and really powerful crossbows. Those are two things that helped determine our future, because that meant that we thrived in the highlands, not on the lowlands. The lowlands are full of mean Egyptians with their way faster chariots and their way more accurate and powerful crossbows that they mounted on those chariots. We scattered up in the highlands. You ought to think of King David as a guerrilla warfare leader. That's what the stories in the Old Testament about he and Saul are about. Coming down out of the highlands is what we did best, into better, fertile territory, to steal, to then fight, yes, to regain and claim our independence. It's why we called God El Shaddai, God of the mountains. That's where we were, the bandit band of rebels, attracting those around us that we might find an identity and eventually come to rule over the much more desirable lowlands. But in the meantime, guerrilla warfare is in your past. I live down by Cooper Mountain, and when I, in the mornings especially, come off the trail, there's an amazing view of Mount Hood on whatever road that is as I'm moving east. And I often start my day with a sense of beauty and seeing it and then wondering, where am I? Well, I'm not in Colorado. What a mountain. My roots are in Seattle, so I'm used to Mount Rainier. Mount Hood is so stark. It's a good reminder of what grounds us here. When I fly in from the week I spend in Colorado about once every 4 or 6 weeks, it's the same thing, looking out my window. Oh, there's the mountain. Oh, that's right. This is that chapter of my life as interim pastor. That center of our world has often been mountains. Mount Sinai was our first. That's where we got our identity, and we got it there because we got the law. Now, Moses, of course, if you recall, didn't get to see the promised land. He did all this great work, and then he fell in disfavor with God, and so died on the mountainside before coming into the promised land. We pay attention to what we get up the mountain that shapes us before entering our promised land. Jesus takes the passage that you just heard, Steve read about binding it on our hearts, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength. Later on, Jesus gets asked, what's the most important commandment? It's a trick question. If he says, well, you shouldn't murder, they'll say, oh, so adultery's okay? If he says, well, you really shouldn't steal, they'll say, oh, so you don't mind when someone uses the Lord's name in vain? It's a trick question. Jesus changes the answer and quotes Steve's text instead. Here's the law. Here's the law, not 10, but you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And then he adds, and love your neighbor as yourself. Not bad for thinking on your feet, right? This is the law of love. This is the law that we've been given. You ought to take the law seriously. We progressives sometimes get a little nervous about law talk. We're really good on freedom and liberation. Not so hot when it comes to someone's the boss of me. Today is law. We should be like Jesus and not avoid it or resent it. We ought to be creative in helping generate a law that works for us, that is meaningful for us. Last week, as we were finishing Exodus and just glimpsing the Promised Land, we've got this series this month for the Promised Land. We start evaluating where we are. By the way, thank you for pledging. Great to hear from Nancy and Andrew the good news of where we are. What didn't get said is Nancy and Andrew are ambitious. They came to Bill Funk and myself and said, we think we should shoot for 100. I love it. I quickly put on my pastor hat and said, yeah, of course that's not too high. Of course we can do it, Chuck. Because why not shoot high? That's where we are. It's a stringent thing. We are expecting a lot of us. Yes, we are. There's a tension last week between independence and autonomy. No one's the boss of me. I'm a good, mature disciple, and what a community requires by way of identity and service, constricting us, binding us together for a bigger purpose. This is the Reformation. Sunday we celebrated as well when we Protestants protested enough to say no one, not Pope, not tradition, no, nothing. And then we split off, and as many have said, just kept on splitting forever, for 500 years. We're doing a Catholic Mass this morning. Wow. Only thing better would be to have it last week. Talking roots and branches, folks. A true progressive is able to make sense of the past in a creative way into the future. We don't just start anew, reinventing the wheel. We say, yes, there's a pluralism we affirm, obviously, and here's where we come from. Here's what we can do with it by way of law, interpretation, by way of structure of worship, and doing other creative things, by way of, guess what? White Presbyterians, I'm Presbyterian, I know you're UCC. White Presbyterians aren't the only folks who write music. Well, what a radical notion. And so do we spread our branches, recognize deeper roots. as well. There's an anti-conformity bias to our corner of Christianity that doesn't fit well with the law. And I just wanted to bring that up this morning. There's a law that also ties us, enables us to be who we are, roots and branches. Growing up, I thought it was the coolest thing that I knew the biggest word in the English language, anti-disestablishmentarianism. By the way, don't correct me afterwards. I know there's other biological terms, please. I see some of you nodding your heads. Save it. I'm going to be eating my fruit with my friend. Because anti-disestablishmentarianism is the law we should be about. In a culture that got very turned on by disestablishing, talk to anyone who's been in institutional religion for the last 20, 40, 100 years. Talk to anyone who's been a Rotary, right? Disestablishing has been a really important theme, at least since the 60s. The church is about anti-disestablishing. We understand there's times when folks need to be bound together if we're going to be healthy, if we're going to be any good to anyone. Steve read out of Deuteronomy. I want to back up just a little bit. We find the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20. That whole liberation piece leads to the desert and up the mountain, and Moses gets the tablets. And we all make a golden calf, and he breaks the tablets and has to go back up. Here we are in retrospect, later in Deuteronomy, this time talking in memory. So it's not actively, it's remembering, here's what happened. I just want to read some verses out of Deuteronomy 5, the other listing of the Ten Commandments. Moses convened all Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel," just like "Hear, the Lord our God is one." Only here it's, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes and ordinances that I am addressing to you today, you shall learn them and observe them diligently. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. Not with our ancestor did the Lord make this covenant, but with us, who are all of us here alive today." Talk about bringing the past into the present. "The Lord spoke with you face to face at the mountain out of the fire. At that time, I was standing between the Lord and you to declare to you the words of the Lord, for you were afraid because of the fire and did not go up the mountain." Moses bragging a little there, I guess. "I had to do this for you, the intermediary." And he said, God said, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt." That's the first thing, by the way, maybe we always need to tell people about God. I'm the Lord your God who brings you out of slavery. I'm no longer a slave. "You shall have no other gods before me." There's the command. "You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents," ouch, "to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name." That's the meanest sentence I'll read to you today, don't worry. "Observe the Sabbath day, keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall work and labor, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male or female slave or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock or the resident alien in your towns, so that your male and female slave may rest as well as you. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Honor your father and your mother, as the Lord your God commanded, so that your days may be long and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not commit murder. Neither shall you commit adultery. Neither shall you steal. Neither shall you bear false witness against your neighbor. Neither shall you covet your neighbor's wife. Neither shall you desire your neighbor's house or field or male or female slave or ox or donkey or anything or sports car or anything that belongs to your neighbor. I can't believe it. Shrumm's reading us the 10 Commandments from the pulpit. What is he, an evangelical or something? This is what defines us, our liberation and the strictures designed to help us live together. There can be, like I mentioned hypothetically, a tendency of progressives to want such freedom that no law is seen as the goal. But law helps with identity. Even laws within ourselves help us become mature disciples, a corrective to an inappropriately narcissistic, egocentric, natural tendency. Cedar Hills Church has laws. We have lots of laws you'd know about. Personnel laws, sexual misconduct laws, conflict resolution, things I signed off on a year ago, almost to the day when I began my work with you. But something I pulled out this week I like even better. It's called a code of conduct, because this isn't just about clergy. This is about what y'all should be doing with each other. Here's Chuck's expectation for you all, no matter who you are. I suppose if you're a visitor today, you get to sign off. But otherwise, this is what your church expects of you. First, an appreciation of our commonalities and differences. All right? Not bad. Second, I can't believe this is in a law. This is so great. Here's my favorite law. It just says, joy and a sense of humor. Yeah, we ought to put that on our webpage. Because if you know me, you know that I take humor really seriously. There are no friends I have that aren't ridiculous. It's a measure of trust and love. You should have led with that 13 months ago. We've look at this right here. I got 3 of my team right here. We really think the law of love is expressed in humor and laughing together. Beautiful, beautiful. 3, trust in others' good intentions. That is not easy for me facing Tuesday's election. Which means it really should be in here, right? Even talks to me, straightens me up. Generosity of spirit and substance, willingness to forgive and seek forgiveness, responsibility of our actions and their consequences, commitment to sustaining this church community for those who will follow. Beautiful. What a sense of legacy. So, I sometimes think about laws as how boring a sport would be with no laws. Just, you know this from being a kid, falls apart instantly, or just into bickering. Those laws help structure us. I often think of Christian theology that is problematic for me in many ways as fields I've agreed to play in given my licensure, my ordination. I don't always want to talk about salvation. I don't always want to talk about eschatology or Bible or healing. These are things that I've been given, and I say, all right. Those are the avenues we're going to use so we can be community together. So are we willingly inhibited disciples. As long as we have united and church and Christ in our name, there's some things that are determined for y'all in terms of how we act and what we talk about. We don't have to start from scratch. It's our job, like Jesus leads, though, to breathe new life into those words. Next week, by the way, if you've seen, we've got a little change in schedule. We had our speaker canceled because of illness. And so that meant we've got a special Sunday with, this is always the most dangerous thing if you're one of my parishioners, a special Sunday when Shrumm had nothing planned. Next week, we're going to talk about developmental Christianity. I'm going to call it a sermon, but you will know leading into it, it's a discussion we get to have together with the screen and with a shared reflection on your view as well, how it makes sense in your life. A conversation I didn't know we'd get to have yet that now we get to have. I call it the mountain metaphor. Speaking of mountains, it's for developmental discipleship, how we grow, where we've grown, what might be next. Jesus takes the law and breathes new life into it and turns it into another law. It's a law of love. Tuesday, we're going to need it either way for friends who are crushed and angry and for victors who need shielding in their joy. We recommit ourselves at Chuck to a promised land in 2025. We celebrate coming this far, conscious of pieces we're eager to leave behind and break free from, yes, 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 and ready to define more clearly just what kind of forms, what kind of laws we're going to take into the land to which we're called. Amen.